So I'm here with Moisés Patrício. I would like to thank you for all your trust and your friendship and for being here with us and talking to the 55 Project. I would like to thank the 55 Project, Flavia Macuco, who's the director of the 55 Project, Erica Sauberman, and Guilherme Esteves, who are here as interpreters, translating this talk into English. Rafael, who is also here supporting us. Thank you, Rafael, very much. The talks of the 55 Project are, the 55 Project is a platform which is a space for artists and curators to talk about art practices, and soon those talks will be available online. So we would like to invite you to check our agenda and to follow our next talks and our next events. We will also have questions and answers at the end. After about 60, 70 minutes, we'll be opening the floor for questions and they will be read at the end. So please send whatever questions you want to Moisés. If someone else would like to join in English, please come in. You can use the Zoom link to do so, and it is available. So if you'd like to invite more people to watch, they can come into the Zoom session. So let me introduce myself. I am Tatiane. I am a curator, and I'm here to um, talk to Moisés, to host this wonderful conversation. Moisés is an amazing visual artist, photographer, and Babalorixá, um, a priest of a terreiro. And his trajectory is marked by the crossroads between Black identity and art. And that's why this is the title of this talk, Terreiro as Method of Art, of Communities and Ancestral Knowledge. So his work moves around photographies, installations, sculptures, always bringing this ancestrality and the culture of terreiro as a basis of his practice, but also moving beyond the borders of the terreiro itself, promoting dialogues between religion and art. So he is a member of the Art Council of the Pinacoteca of São Paulo, participated in the Art Biennial in Dakar, and also to the Institute of Research and Memory in Rio de Janeiro. So several exhibits and institutions. His work is currently at the 36th Biennial of São Paulo, and this is a biennial called Not All Travelers Walk Roads of Humanity as Practice, and it's amazing. I hope everyone has a chance to see it. So this is it. I would like to start this talk by asking Moisés a question and then we'll move forward. Is that okay, Moisés? Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think it's almost good evening, right? Yeah, that's it. Almost evening. So I thought, Moisés, that we could start this talk by this title, Terreiro as a Method. which I think is the core of your work. So I think a lot about how the aesthetics of the terreiro in institutions, about the aesthetics, the objects. Terreiro has always been a part of the institution, right? In museums, in the cities that we live, and especially in the art world. But sometimes ceremonial objects that are cloaked in spirituality and religiosity. And in institutions, they become frozen in a way that sometimes is very violent, I guess. So I would like to know more by observing your work, Brasilidades. How do you see this point of reparation? What would you like to talk about this exchange between institution and the terreiro? It is a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much for the invitation, Professor Tatiana. Thank you all for being here. It is always a joy to be able to share a little bit of my journey with you. And this issue that you bring up is so important to me because I start from an idea that the terreiro, which is this field, this geography created by the Black community, the diasporic Black community, especially here in Brazil, to me, this space itself is an art of life. It is an attempt to get things to work out. And in this context, the terreiro itself gathers gestures, choreographies, sounds, objects, colors, relationships, smells, but above all, an idea of collective responsibility. And when I talk about terreiro aesthetics, I'm not just talking about form, but also about the worldview, the cosmology of a specific place in the world of uh, perceiving things and relating to life. In my case, the African worldview is diverse and plural, and so I use the Yoruba worldview as a starting point and the meaning of it to Brazil, to the point of creating Brazilian culture and also Afro-Brazilian culture. So we use as a starting point the body as a territory itself. Time is circular, community is a basis. There are so many layers. And when I think about museums, historically, museums have always captured objects, right? Especially in the context of African culture, but never their ways of existing. And of course, this creates a distortion. The object becomes a document and it becomes a dead document when in truth, it's part of a system of relationships that's very much alive. So all of that displacement that I see, and that's my existence as an artist, tries to create bridges where the distortions decrease and we may exchange knowledge and not a direct opposition because that does not respond well in my case. Anyway, my life, my practice, my research w- really works on building those bridges, on trying to bring other meanings, which are sometimes silenced or ignored. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your work, Brasilidades? What is your work that you're exhibiting at the biennial? Brasilidades, for me, is the research that I've been carrying out for the past 5 years And it is born from a question: how to retell the Brazilian history from other starting points, other gravity centers. So you have to define if you're Brazilian or not. What defines that? What kind of situation defines your Brazilianness, your Brasilidade? When you think about history from inside out, we understand that one of the basic cooperations for Brazilian culture is the terreiro culture. So the MO um, perpasses gastronomy, dance, science, technology. But when this story is officially told, the Brazilian that shows up is the white family, the colonizer. Those images that take authorship. So the series wanted to materialize a question. And one of the things that make me fall in love with art all over again is that you always find a way. Art goes everywhere and can be more efficient in the production of thought itself. So I decided to prepare a series that I'm exhibiting at the Biennial. There are 50 uh, cement block sculptures, 40 by 40. And those cement blocks, I have liturgic vessels, clay vessels, which are used here at the terreiro to keep what's sacred, what's important to us in spiritual context. It's also a symbolic representation of the body, the human body. It is made of clay. The shape is circular. And somehow I try to put those two bodies in contact with each other, the modern body and the ancestral body. And I ask this question: who defines Brasilidade? For instance, my name is Moisés Patrício. It's a Jewish name and a Portuguese name. And I am a Babalorixá. I am a community leadership, keeper of memories, of practices. So everything goes through me to the point where my family gave me this name. And I don't feel any less or more Brazilian than others, but I always feel confused. I always feel like a tourist on my own culture. This process is still mid creation, although, if you think about the history of art itself, they have tried to define Brazil so often. The modernists have tried, the colonialists have tried, but I guess the perspective from the indigenous people and the black people have always has been erased a lot, even though they have contributed so much. So my work in the past 5 years has been trying to understand that from the inside out. Here at the Terreiro, in Candomblé, in Brazil as a whole, we have this perspective that we belong to another society, inside and out, right? Yes, there are different ways to perceive things, to relate to life and to others. And we understand that civilization has migrated with bodies and established itself here. And so it is interacting with this Western civilization, right? So when you think about Brazilianity and my art, Brasilidade, it causes questions about uh, in being part, being a member, being taken in. So this is just an attempt to open this dialogue with the public.
And you exchange the liturgical vases with other terreiros, right? Can you explain that exchange that took place where you expand what you did in your terreiro to other communities? Yeah, my grandfather said that the first social network in Brazil was a terreiro, because today we still have the practice or the custom to visit other terreiros in the rest of Brazil. So it's very common for people to go from São Paulo to Bahia, for example, to go to the celebration of Iemanjá. So that's a generic example, but we have families moving from remote locations to go to Pernambuco, to Acre, to Bahia, or to Rio Grande do Sul. So we're always migrating, even within our own country. And this story kind of follows, and this network follows the story, the history of the country. I've got a huge network of people that I know and of family members. I come from a traditional terreiro that is more than 218 years old, so it has a huge network of people involved, people who are still in touch, and we're still going to each other's celebrations, and we collaborate with the constructions and the production of local knowledge. And when I thought about doing this series of works, I activated my network and I proposed an exchange. So, for example, I said that I needed an ancestral representative from a specific terreiro, and a vessel is kind of like this representative because clay comes from earth, but also because of the relationship that people build with this object. So that's what I started doing. I started having these exchanges, and I created new vessels. And I offered these terreiros new vessels, and they offered me their vessels that they had and that weren't being used. And so this series was born out of this gesture of exchange. So the first gesture is my relation of reciprocity with my surroundings, and the second gesture involves negotiating these bodies with the building of the sculpture, because at some moment in time this concrete block gets full and it becomes almost impossible to interact with any other body. So I kind of force this relation. I centralize these vessels, and oftentimes I bring more balance, and I create balance, and sometimes I create a bit of suffocation, and there's this whole process that's very important to this work. And so reparation, it's almost like you are creating a tension. This isn't a cultural reparation, right? It's not something that's simple. There's a bit of tension, and this tension is maintained in the object itself, right? And between concrete and ceramic and clay, in this exchange of material. That's what you're trying to explain, right? Yes, exactly. I'm always trying to find a synthesis, because I'm always trying to think about reparations between institutions and the terreiro, and I try to think about how that takes place. And reparation isn't just about returning what was taken. According to my understanding, reparation is transforming the structures that continue producing an erasure. And that's why I dedicate myself to arts, because this only makes sense to me in this context. Again, I understand that art is an important political tool. And that's it. When an artist from a terreiro invites me, I understand that this is an opening up of this movement. And in the production of my work, a lot of these issues are very much present. There's an infinite number of attempts to exist and of being in the world, and going beyond existence, right? It's about making use or benefiting from everything that the world can offer. Now, thinking about the biennial and the paths and language, you also say a lot that Eshu, the central figure in your practice, you talk a lot about Eshu, and in your text, that's something that you say in the text of the biennial. You say that your practice is an Eshuistic place. Let's see how that gets translated to English. So it's a place of Eshu. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about that. That is, this ancestrality. Maybe you could talk about that as a start with or the work that we do as a starting point. And maybe people who are at the biennial, they can go see your work. So how is this ancestrality positioned when you talk to, for example, Master Didi? Sorry, I think you have to repeat what you said, Moisés, because it was really low. So I move. I I move based on a different epistemology when I think about the culture of the terreiro. Eshu, for example, is a deity which is very important for us, and it's translated as a crossing. The concept of the crossroads involves Eshu. That's how we understand Eshu. The crossroads is this point of convergence and divergence. It's a neutral place of movement. It's a place of fruition and confusion. And all of my practice comes from this place. There's always a crossroads. And that's why I'm always going between languages. That's an exercise of freedom, because I don't want to be stuck to a specific style, which is something that's very common in this universe, in this European universe, Eurocentric universe, because when you get fixed to a certain style or way of doing, then sure, people compliment you. But in my worldview, that's a big problem, because we're always growing and expanding and things are always changing. So I come from a place where I have the freedom of choice. I always want to go back to this neutral position whenever I want to. So for example, I'm taking pictures, I'm photographing in a specific series, but then if at a specific moment I feel that my work becomes too predictable, I go back to this neutral space and I make a new decision. So then I may start working on sculptures or drawings, and I participate in rituals. But again, I always want to go back to these crossroads, which is this issue place. And again, this involves this idea that there's a safe space, which is the center of my practice. It's at the heart of my practice, and I can always go back to this place whenever I need to. And in this case, Eshu is not a person, it's not a personality, it's an organizing principle of the world. This is according to my urban worldview. Eshu is movement, it's life itself that's pulsing. Because again, Eshu is a very important deity. Eshu reigns over communication and crossroads and choices and consequences. And so this is where I start from to research and to produce. And this is a beautiful place that the terreiro offers to the world. There are many different possibilities of centers. We don't have a single space. So I start from a place of Eshu, but there are other people that start from Oshun, and they will try to understand the language of the waters and how the waters can tell you different things. But I'm somewhat biased because the terreiro always fascinates me every single day because it keeps me in constant touch with the reality of the present. And in general, to me, life is very enchanting. It's very exuberant. It brings forth all of these challenges, and I always get very emotional when I'm in the forest and looking at a landscape. I get an infinite number of insights, and I find my new position in life. I'm able to redimension myself. Because the artist has this really crazy thing, which is the God syndrome. We think we're very important, and we think that what we have to say is fundamental to everyone else, and everybody has to listen to us. But but it's better if people are listening to artists, right? Yeah, but when I go back to nature, this gains a new dimension because everything's exuberant and understanding the figure of a shoe is important to understand my work and my process. This is a very important point for me. And we align. Are we aligned on where we align with Master Gigi? Because your work that's at the Biennial is beautiful, and I remember it's how it evolved. And maybe you can tell me afterwards. But I remember your work growing when we were talking a few years ago, and I remember that at the beginning it was small, and it did grow, right? So tell me a little bit about this process. Well, Mestre Gigi is a very important artist, but he's also a very important priest and also an important intellectual. He's important in Brazilian culture and in terreiro culture. So he was also a priest, and he died when he was 93 years old. And he maintained a cultural legacy, a memory, and a material and cultural heritage that was very rich, especially for us in the diaspora. And when I received the invitation for the biennial, it's interesting because, Master Gigi, in the terreiro, there's a lot of respect for the elders. And so for us, getting older is a blessing. Of course, there's a whole social context because it's a miracle when Afro descendants get old because of all of the adversities, and especially in the period of slavery, it was very rare for people to live beyond the 80s, their 80s. And in Brazil, there was an important something was very important, which just this terreiro culture, which kept these people alive. This was a place where people could live up to 80 years of age, when before they only lived between 35 or 40 years. So we believe that this capacity and the culture of the terreiros and this cultivation of nature and the maintenance of emotional health, this is all very important. We also have the culture of the old black men, these deities that people resort to because they want to understand how people got to be so old. Because despite all of the crimes being committed, these people were able to continue being humans, and they were able to pass along important bodies of knowledge. And Mestre Gigi is one such figure. So, because this is a very important moment of my life, and as an expression of gratitude to him, and as an expression of gratitude to many other people who grew old in the terreiro and who left their own legacy, I decided to pay homage to him. And so my homage was exactly to offer my time to him. So I thought to myself, how can I pay homage to an ancestral being? Well, I thought that I could create a temple. So, so the creation of this homage took about 3 months, and this started with my relation to time. So again, here we're talking about repetitions and patterns of repetitions and attempts to seek stability, because I also, after I built the work, I try to create stability. I try to make sure that those bodies and the community and this grouping, I try to make sure that all of this and these gestures and these intentions can be in a stable place.
So the work is really born from this dynamic, the will to pay homage to an important figure, and using time as homage itself as an honor. So here, use this time. And then during this time, the pieces were produced. For those of you who haven't seen the exhibit, there is a nautical cord, and I cover it with hair scrunchies. So how many uh, scrunchies did we use? Over 60,000 hair bands or scrunchies. So they were aligned and trying to keep a pattern of repetition and vibration, but always um, using a starting point of a ritual of mantras, of repetition, states of consciousness that can only be accessed when you really dedicate time to them. And at the end of this entire challenge, I offer, there is a part that is material, but the greater part is immaterial, which is my gesture and my time. I am offering my gesture and my time. Exactly. So there are nine works, nine pieces. Each one is 100 meters large, 99 meters large, and they're grouped into communities because it's terreiro created other terreiros that create other terreiros, so they become a large tree that bring new trees. So that's what I'm trying to bring in this concept to this homage, as a memory, as a reminder that it is possible to live together, that loneliness is a trap. Isolate yourself fixes nothing, and that this should be a consensus. But if there is some sort of negotiation, right? I isolate you, or you group to form radical groups. So I'm trying to bring a little bit of all of those values and inheritances that go from generation to generation, to tell the next generation that there is a possibility of being together in a healthier way, that it is possible to create more effective bonds. So if you belong to a cultural a family that is cultural in Candomblé, they spend their lives in a connected manner. We know that this uh, has an impact on health. So isolation or involvement will impact on whether you're healthy or not. It will bring quality of life as you grow old. So at the terreiro, people grow very, very old. We recently had Mother Carmen pass at the Pontois Terreiro. She was amazing, Yalorixá, such an intellectual that left amazing findings about humanities and culture, relationships. Also, Mother Ana Jogum from the Xumaré temple, she was a living library. So many people that always leave a lot of knowledge. They really contribute to the collective imaginary and memory, even with all of the erasure and non-recognition of those people. So with my participation in my art, my historical reparation is I see it, I'm here. I offer this moment as recognition. Here it is. Let's move forward. The information has come here. Now let's move forward. Let's learn how to live with our friends, right? We don't have to eat our little friends, okay? That's past. You don't have to kill them, right? So trying to bring this entire responsibility, when you participate in a terreiro culture, you become better, a better person, more committed, more ethical. And this legacy comes from Master Gigi. Master Gigi, people don't talk about him as much yet, but he was part of the first biennials in São Paulo. He wrote several books. He visited several exhibits. Yes, a great artist and a spiritual leader, right? Yes, incredibly intellectual. He translated Yoruba to the Terreiro community in Brazil, which is a reference to everyone now. Yoruba is the second language that people speak at Terreiro. So, thinking about him, about his legacy, I've been thinking a lot about this, about possibilities of existing, to keep fighting for other vibrations and symphonies, other ways of relating to each other. And I really, really enjoy this work because it sort of sends a vibration of hug me, maybe cuddly, but there is an invitation there to walk this path. And that's why the paths of Master Didi, this is also part of the exercise of imagination where you can follow in his path, walk as a possibility of drawing something, thinking about the tracks. It is a work that needs the public to walk around it. Yeah, so it has its own path, right? Exactly. It's a possible path. Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, Moisés. I think that maybe we could talk a little bit about what the art world brings to the terreiro, because what we see is that art professionals that visit the biennial, the exhibits, w- we look for the aesthetics of it. And you were talking about how this work is alive. The aesthetics is alive. It's always in transformation, it's always exchanging between bodies and the work itself. Specifically in this work of yours that it's being exhibited at the biennial. So how does art inform the terreiro? What does the terreiro, let let's say, how does the terreiro stand in relation to art? What does the terreiro borrow from art? Well, not a single thing. I love it. Really, I swear. I know that the museum culture and the institutional culture, they tend to separate things and segregate them. And in the terreiro, we have never separated the sensitivity from spirituality, aesthetics from ethics. Everything here walks hand in hand. They really do. People are not in pieces. At least we try to reduce this kind of fragmentation that occurs. So For the most part, I feel myself bringing things to this universe because there's still a political force, an organizational force that occurs in the world and is there for you to interact with. So my exercise is always to resize those relations. They're very asymmetrical. So when I'm invited to go to the museum, then I'm taking concepts of responsibility, listening, time, everything that's missing to the institution itself. And I go there especially to inform the institution that there are other spaces that produce knowledge and thinking. The terreiro is especially important for this and has always produced this. And what we now see as culture is a fruit of this production. We have produced carnival, for instance, the greatest living art. It's amazing. It happens and then it goes away and then the following year it's reborn. So this is just an example of what's produced in our context, which is so powerful. So I still feel 2025 as a mission. It's a mission to build. Sure, I wish I could be doing something else and talking about something else as well. But I know there is an echo of the delay in this country. It's incredible. Topics that have been discussed and um, abroad or is are being discussed here. What's produced outside does not come in. I don't know. There's a gap there. And so when you're talking about lives, 20 years of my life costs a lot. 20 years is um, it's a lot of struggle to be able to be seen, recognized, understood, heard. So I don't know. I am a councilman at the Pinacoteca in São Paulo, and I always think, how can I how can I take my experience to the terreiro? And then at the end I go and I think, no, I'm going to keep on listening to my grandfather. And it is not a direct criticism of a specific institution. I think there are things that have to be discussed inside the institution itself. It has to be revisited, discussed, expanded, rethought. It shouldn't occur only under urgency. Oh my God, they found out, so let's go fix it, and then do it in any way possible. So I have been working hard as a community leadership, which is to move the this axis. I insist on having a meeting, a talk, an exhibit, and an invitation. So let's like, do you want to come here from the terreiro and then we move out of here? Can you create a link to this place? But it hasn't been happening in a way or another. It keeps going, right? Yeah, little by little, right? It should move faster because 20 years is a long time. It's a whole life. Yeah. Yeah, maybe not for an institution. Maybe the institution is 300 years old, but when you're talking about the individual person, come on, it's 300 old urgency, right? So let's show a few images so that we can finish and open the floor for questions. What do you think? I would like to show some images, but I can't seem to do it. Can you do it from there? It seems to be blocked here. It's raining a lot here, so can you see? Okay, there you go. Do you want me to show a specific page? No, this is my portfolio. It is 20 years of art production. I started really young. So I selected some works and exhibits that I've carried out in the past few years, but the majority has a crossroads. You see, there's a between sculpture, photography, painting, video performance. So this was an exhibit at Estação Gallery here in São Paulo, which is a very well-known gallery. And those sculptures on the floor, yeah, this is the beginning of the Brasilidade series, where you have the sacred vessels with the 40 by 40 cement blocks. They each weigh 50 kilos. So this is an attempt to open a dialogue with modernism. Here out front, you have some paintings. The Eshu deity is always very present in my entire process. This image of Eshu is looking forward. There's a face that looks forward and another that looks backwards, talking about the relation with time, his relationship with time, the Yoruba vision, the nonlinear vision. It is a spiral vision, isometric. So I always bring this image to remind me. Here you can see a series of photographs on the sides. There are people from my family because that's also one of my topics. And I am putting those people inside at the center of the narrative. Sometimes leave them room to rest because sometimes that's denied them. So sometimes they're sitting on a chair. Here, another takes from the same exhibit. Tell me where you want me to stop. Yeah, those are all images that are produced in the context of the terreiro. And I try to empower myself with this culture to be able to displace the narrative. So here you have self-portraits. I am sitting with Grandma Cecilia Oxalá. She's such an important figure in the Brazilian cultural context. She educates, teaches. She's a reference. She's an intellectual, an amazing person. She's 90 something years old and still producing contents and thoughts and knowledge from the Terreiro philosophy. So here, right next to it, I am sitting on my grandpa's lap, listening to his stories. I'm always sitting at their feet to talk about ethics, about tradition of listening, of caring, of respecting.
And then I put all of this, and I increased the size of all of this using paintings that are 2 meters by 2 meters. So there's this Eshu painting here, and you've got these sculptures that are tributes to Master Didi. So this shows how everything started, right? Yes, exactly. This is a metaphor. It's a metaphor of possibilities. Another thing that moves me and that made me want to create this tribute to Master Didi, it was an understanding of the aesthetic of meetings. Because we produce something out of these encounters, these celebrations and encounters with our families. So I started looking, creating this contour out of these groupings. A lot of my work involves groupings. There's never only a single sculpture. It's always a group of sculptures. And these things are built throughout the years. So they're all based on this idea of agglomeration, connections, and hives, and cities, and villages. So it's always based from a point of contact. And here we've got 3 examples of this attempt. Here we've got Yao, an initiate. The terreiro culture is an initiation culture. And when we consider the slave trade, in the terreiro we can say that there's this attempt to return people to their land, to their homes. And in Candomblé culture, for example, people go through a process of initiation, and this initiation is a return home. So in this sense, you're returning home philosophically, culturally. This is basically a return to one's essence. And this is a scene of an initiate, of a young person that's initiating. And there's some really interesting data that shows that in the last 15 to 20 years, people have been looking more at their own history, and they've been trying to understand this universe from a healthier position without the fear of being persecuted. So there's an increasing number of people joining the universe of Candomblé. A lot of people who initially were not authorized to return. And this is another scene that tells a story which involves Yahoo. Okay, so your work involves young people and elders. Yes, it involves the recently initiated and the returnees, people who are going back to the culture of Candomblé and for the respect of the orishas or deities. This is another part of the Brazilian series. This is another series involving yaos. And I just want to give you a little bit of context about this yao series. This was born or started 10 years ago when there was a kind of awakening, which is when things started to change a bit. This was when people started to better understand their cultural heritage. This is when people started to become more interested in this. And so here I was thinking about a dialogue involving the idea of a renaissance. And so in Brazil, we're kind of going through a renaissance, and people don't realize that we're talking about the renaissance of black and indigenous peoples. And this is a movement which we cannot go around, and which is present, and which is undeniable, and which is happening, and which makes me want to document this and make this present in our memory. I want to document this period. So today we have more information about the terreiro culture, orisha culture, and indigenous culture, especially African indigenous culture and indigenous Latin American culture. So today we have more information about this. We have more people talking about this. So, you know, something is happening. Yes, this is a kind of return. A return of knowledge. Yes, exactly. So this is what this series talks about. Here we have another exhibit, and here I'm having a dialogue with Obdias Nascimento, which is another very incredible ancestor. This is one of my aunts. And you can see that she's trying to continue her legacy and sending that knowledge forth to a future generation. So she's a professor to me. She's that kind of human being that's a privilege to be next to. So she's an issue aunt. So this is kind of a tribute as well, right? Well, in the history of portraits, in the history of art, also or always involves the story of the aggressor. So for example, we always have at the center of portraits people like Napoleon, people who promoted a lot of nefarious things. And so when I access this art form, I start putting other kind of ancestralities at the center of my work. And so here we have a lot of women because the terreiro culture is a matriarchal culture. It's managed and organized by women. So that's why I include members of my family and a lot of black women who are all over, spread all over the country, and who are producing health and care even though they're in unfavorable situations. And these women are always very active, right? They're always very active in these images. Active not in a Eurocentric sense, but in the sense that they're always moving. Yes, exactly. So this is a scene that I like a lot, and which is very recurrent in the terreiro. This is a ritual called bore. In a Portuguese translation, this would be feeding the head. So when somebody in the community is going through a difficult moment, especially emotionally, people come around this person in the terreiro in order to feed the head of this person. And the kind of feed varies. It can be, it depends on the importance of that person in the community. It involves remembering that person. It involves taking consideration the collaborations that that person left behind. And this also involves actual physical food. For example, it involves preparing that person's favorite food and the food that the deities receive. And so we aggregate around this person and we do this movement to rescue the person from what is oftentimes a period of depression or perhaps a change of cycle or some kind of bad energy. And so with this painting, I bring forth these values that are intrinsic to the terreiro. So here we're talking about, ethics in relation to other people and ethical behavior and being responsible for other people's well-being. So we come together to do the Buddhis, and everybody in the terreiro goes through this kind of rite, and life is challenging for everyone, and so we have this commitment to come together to promote this rescuing or this kind of nutrition. And so this is what this painting is trying to communicate. It's about thinking about a solution to crises. So this is what we call bodhi, and bodhi is a term that's very common in our community. When we say bodhi, everybody knows what it means. And when you leave the terreiro, that understanding is not that present. But bodhi also always involves this kind of community ethics. Yeah, it's this kind of community feeding. Because usually there's this separation of the head and the intellectual aspect from the body, right? In Eurocentric culture, there's a separation of the head, which is the logical aspect of humans, from the body. The head is also where the spirit lies. It's what provides the, the aspect of living to people. Yes, exactly. Do you also want to talk about some kind of installation at the biennial, or well, you can just go through the pictures in sequence because it involves a lot of this artwork that's present there. I'm trying to leave us with a little bit of time for questions and answers, but my computer is not really cooperating with me. So these are some scopes related to the beginning of your series, Brasilidades. Yes, here you can see that the series has already unfolded onto other aspects. Yeah, so here you can see that there's some kind of persistence, there's a change in material. Yeah, here I try to question and displace things because a lot of times words are not enough, and videos also don't do the job. And so sometimes I'm able to communicate through a sculpture or through drawing. I really love this universe of the arts. Now, this series here is a series that's based on questions. I'm moved by questions. And so the name of the series is Aceita, or Do You Accept This? This is a series that I've been working on for 12 years. And I take pictures of the palm of my hand in many different contexts. So I take a picture a day and I upload this to Instagram. And I start from a principle of the the hand of the artwork. When it's a white context, this involves art. When it's a black hand, it involves just actual, manual labor or something negative. So I realized that the audience reacts a lot to black hands in Brazil because, in general, people are only interested in black people to the extent of what they can provide. So I started creating reflections and discussions based on the palm of the hand. I consider the palm of the hand as a possible space for dialogue. So there are more than 6,000 images. Here's just a small sample. The other part of this is is in my Instagram account. That's where most of the images are. This is a work that's in development, and it's a kind of visual diary where basically I talk about a lot of different subjects. And it's a kind of manifesto, right? Um, you make comments about what happens during the week. Yes, exactly. This involves a wish to socialize or to dialogue with what's happening during the week. And this is also a series that I use as a kind of diary of my state of spirit because our state of spirit changes a lot. So there are days where I'm more upset, there are days where I'm more excited, and all of this influences my work. And this exists in social media, right? This is a space that also needs to be occupied. Yeah, the media have produced this imaginary place. And racism and all the negative things that we inherited ends up being perpetuated. So, here we're talking about erasures and things like that. It's really impressive. Although today there are more people producing and programming, and so things are changing. And here you can see some articles that where I've been um, displayed. And this is my studio. Okay, great. Now let's open up the floor for questions.
Okay, so we're now opening the floor for questions. We will be able to see questions written in the chat, and I'll send them to Moisés. I'll ask the questions. Are there any questions? We were able to see a little bit of your work, so that was nice. We're waiting for questions. Maybe we can chat a little bit more while we wait. Sure. Here, can you see this? Well, I think your internet connection is now breaking up a little. Can you see it? Yes. Yes, that's beautiful. So we have um, people thanking us for the exchange. Your work is really, really amazing. Moisés, you're breaking up. Oh, there you go. I think something's gone on maybe when you move. I have learned a lot as usual. So thank you so much for your teachings. It is always a life lesson talking to you. They're never just aesthetics. This work is incredible. And this always keeps me hopeful that I will be able to see this happening. They are works that are alive. They not only react, but they repair the future. All sides of it, the white side and the black side. So it is a meeting that, just like in Brasilidade, it has components of tension, talking about cement and geometrical shapes, but there is always this meeting of, which is not an aggressive meeting, always a meeting of transformation, of life. So this is a gift. This is a blessing. This is something that is very clear in your practice. And those 20 years of struggle have not been in vain. As I mentioned to you, you're not an artist that is part of the biennial. The biennial did not change you. You changed the biennial. You bring something to it, not a biennial artist. We talked about the biennial exhibit and we focused on it a little bit, but because of the work that you were showing there and that has the knowledge of generations that you were so generously continued it. We have a question, Moisés. Can I ask you? Let me read it. Moisés' art is amazing. I love the way he expresses himself. How did your perception of the potential of your hand, the palm of your hand, evolved through its journey? Well, my search, my attempt in this series, but also with my entire work, is to understand levels of consciousness. With this apartheid, it occurs here in Brazil somewhat. People pretend they can't see. la la la, I can't see anything, but there is segregation. People who live in the outskirts of the city sometimes cannot get downtown, cannot access culture, specific public spaces and parks. And so it's very hard to access those other realities and other consciousnesses. And this series, I made it 13 years ago, and I was in this search to access other ways of thinking, other opinions, and then you have this boom of social media, and I finally see an opportunity to access those people with internet. I start having internet access more often, so I have access to other people, other social bubbles. And as I interacted with these other consciousnesses, the work increased and grew and changed. So that's how it happened. So it was born outside social media. It's born as photography, right? Yes, at first, yes. It begins by walking around my own neighborhood. So it comes from walking around in the neighborhood, and then I access other neighborhoods, and then I can access downtown, and then I can access social media. So it grows and expands more and more. So it makes me really happy because I get feedback from so many places, from public schools to parties, or just so many interactive possibilities that have come up. And the series grows as I access those other heads, those other minds. Yeah, the mobility starts from giving something and then expands into social media. So we have another question. Thank you, Cynthia, for your question. She says, thank you for this talk. My engagement with Yoruba concept has been scholarly, and it is a profound experience to see your engagement as an artist with these ideas in a way that is closer to a lived experience. She's talking about a lived experience. So, continuing. And yet, as a Black American, I resonate so much with of what you have shared. When I see the works in cement and clay, and cement and clay, I am struck by the way the materials enter the archaeological record as if providing an update of these records, archaeological records. Have you thought about the the archaeological record in your choice to use these materials? Yes, very much so. When I propose that other terreiros donate those vessels, I am very interested in what's coming with the vessel, the memories that come with it, the living archive, the living record. And of course, there is an attempt on my part to showcase and also maybe to denounce the old challenges and also the new challenges. As a young Black artist, Babalorisha here in São Paulo, how do I handle this entire repertoire? This was one of the ways, but there are 1,000 ways to do it. So, what makes me really happy about this cultural, philosophical, spiritual inheritance is to understand that the entire Yoruba philosophy demands a state of presence. This is the basic principle. You have to be present. To dance, you have to be present. To be emotional, to pray, to eat, you have to be present. In Western civilization, in this Eurocentric worldview, the rule is to distract yourself. You cannot be present. It's almost an order. Do not be present. So there's a lot of light, a lot of noise, a lot of confusion, everything that takes you from yourself. The culture itself, not just the TV or the cell phones, but relations themselves, they are established from distraction. The more distracted you are, the more vulnerable you are, and the more interesting you are to someone else. So to honor the Orisha and nature is to be in a state of constant presence. And that's what I'm trying to bring with Brasilidade, but also with my entire research is the state of presence. There's something happening here. Do you see it? Maybe you don't notice. Maybe that's the topic. Thank you, Moisés. Let's see if there's another question. I think we can give it another minute or so. I thought the title of an Igor Simone's exhibit about Master Didi, I thought was beautiful, where he said, "The initiated in the mystery do not pass." And so it's talking about life again, about presence. Like you said, nowadays we are being uh, imprisoned by distraction so that we become vulnerable, so that we're not present, so that the streets are empty, the hands on have screens on them, and children are growing up like that. So I really appreciate in your work where the initiated show up. So this exchange of generations, the presence of taking care of each other, the to go across generations and ancestrality. So it is radically so something that should be the basis of life, but something that becomes radical at our in our times. The distraction, the bodies are so they cannot be present. They're always suspended on the clouds, right? So this is an entire way of thinking and of knowing things that feeds this presence and this corporality. So we are radically fighting in a light way, I guess, this stiffening of our bodies that we see today.
You're on mute. Well, there's something that guides me, that helps me to think, which is something that's very present in my life. And it's the question of why my instinct of survival is always blossoming up so much. There's a historical issue there. the period of slavery allowed people to develop technologies of survival and technologies for the maintenance of humanity. Now, the difference between the past and the present today is that today everybody's on the same boat in relation to slavery. And then on the other side, there's a tradition of survival and of resilience. There's a tradition of how to resist and how to maintain yourself healthy and on how to maintain yourself joyful and keep your sanity. A lot of people don't know how to do that. And it's in that context that I position myself in the world. I am always trying to create. And I'm always trying to say that there are bridges and there are possibilities. Sometimes we just have to change the way we perceive things. Sometimes we have to change the way we listen. So that, first of all, we won't be kidnapped or hijacked by this failure that we're living through. Because what we have today is the failure of an empire, the failure of a world project. So the question is, what do we do? And there's this whole attempt, we have all of these terreiros trying to preserve these issues, because these are fundamental issues that are unnegotiable. And one of these unnegotiable aspects is our health. And another thing that's unnegotiable is our relations. We can't negotiate affection. Everything that's been given and offered is in a process of decomposition. So we need to find a new way of doing things. And a lot of different forms of this have already been elaborated. And if there's an indigenous person today playing tamaraca, that's happening because people were able to survive this. We survived this whole wave of 300 years of an attempt to diminish ourselves. So we're resisting these distractions and zombilization, if you will. Zombies in the past were just something that were present in movies, but this is something that we see today. And we see people being stimulated by hate and anger, by fear. And art in this context, to me, is a very powerful tool. First of all, because it's a kind of strength. I think art is a very seductive force. It's always there and moving, and then it goes in you, and if you're not paying attention, it messes you up. And if you're paying attention, it organizes you, and it can revolt you, causes revolts. And so there are many possibilities, and art crosses over many areas of knowledge. You can research science or technology or math or physics or chemistry, all from an artistic standpoint. And this is what this exercise has been to me. And then I've been trying to involve these values that have been keeping me and my community alive. These values that put me in a healthy position. I become very surprised when my colleagues are just crumbling because they don't understand a mechanism of survival. So I think art has that capacity. So when I see Rosana Paulina's work, for example, I can say that you can cure people through images. You can deconstruct what has been imagined, and you can build something else, and then you can get more air and oxygen, and you can get this vital energy, and you can become critical again. Let's frighten the colonial ghosts. There's so many things that are happening in these processes, and sometimes this becomes very folkloric. But actually, it's something much deeper than that. The mystery is greater. And art gives me the tools so that I can do my work in a less violent way. Yeah, so there's this encounter, right? There's these crossroads. Art can be this kind of crossroads, and it opens up and it invites. It invites you to be a part of these other forms of knowledge, such as black knowledge and indigenous knowledge, and we have to be able to listen. So, Moisés, I would like to really thank you. You always share with us an enormous amount of knowledge, your worldview and your care, your affection and your friendship. That's something I'm very grateful for. Well, I'm the one who thanks you. It's great to know you. You're a person that I admire a lot. You're a role model in curatorship, and it was great to be able to have this fluid, organic, and open conversation with you. This was a privilege to me, so thank you for your generosity. Thank you, Moisés. And thank you, Flavia. Thank you, Rafael, and Erika, and Guilherme for being present. And thank you to the 55 Project and Flavia for having opened up this space for us. Thank you. And congratulations, Moisés. Thank you. A warm embrace to all of you. I love being here. Thank you.